Hey everyone, I never thought I'd be posting something like this, but I really need to get this off my chest. It's been a wild ride these past few days, and I still can't wrap my head around what happened. This whole thing feels like it came straight out of a soap opera, but I swear every word of it is true. So my name's Jack, and I've been working as a senior banker at a pretty big firm in New York for the last decade. Life's been good. I've got a beautiful partner, Emma, and we're celebrating our 10th anniversary together. I wanted to do something special for her. 10 years with someone who's seen you at your best and worst deserves more than just a fancy dinner, right? Emma and I have had our share of ups and downs, but we've always made it through stronger. This time I wanted to remind her just how much she means to me. So, I planned this big surprise anniversary party at our favorite spot, a little rooftop garden restaurant where we first met. I invited all our closest friends and family, making sure to keep it all under wraps so Emma wouldn't suspect a thing. Now, here's where things start getting a bit strange. There's this cleaning lady at my bank, Margaret. She's always been a bit of an enigma, quiet, keeps to herself, but super efficient. She's been around for as long as I can remember, and I've always been polite, but we never really interacted beyond the usual nod or good morning. For some reason, on the day I was finalizing the guest list, I had this crazy idea to invite her. It wasn't a pity invite or anything, I just felt like she deserved a nice night out. Everyone deserves a break, right? Plus, I thought it would be a nice gesture, like showing that we're all part of the same team, no matter the job title. So I walked up to her during my lunch break and I said, "Hey Margaret, I'm throwing a party for my anniversary this weekend. It would be great if you could join us." She looked a bit startled at first, and for a moment I regretted even bringing it up. But then she smiled a real, genuine smile that I hadn't seen from her before, and she said she'd be honored to come. We exchanged numbers so I could send her the details, and that was that. Fast forward to the night of the party. Everything was set up perfectly, the lights, the music, the food. Emma thought we were just going out for a quiet dinner, so when we walked in and everyone yelled, "Surprise!" she was completely floored. It felt amazing seeing her so happy, surrounded by people who love her. But then Margaret showed up, and that's when things took a turn. A really weird turn. I didn't think much of it when she walked in, but then I started noticing the way people were reacting. First, it was just a few raised eyebrows and some whispers, but then it became full-on shocked faces. I had no idea what was going on until Emma turned around, saw Margaret, and suddenly went pale. It was like she'd seen a ghost. I swear, I'd never seen her look so shocked, not even when I proposed. It was like all the blood drained from her face in an instant. She just stood there, staring at Margaret like she was seeing something impossible. At first I thought maybe Emma was just surprised to see someone from work there. Margaret wasn't exactly part of our usual social circle. But then I noticed something else. Emma wasn't the only one reacting. A few of our friends were whispering to each other, and even her parents had this odd look on their faces. I was so confused. What was I missing? Margaret, on the other hand, was calm. She walked right up to Emma with this knowing smile, almost like she'd been expecting this reaction. Emma didn't say anything at first, she just stood there, frozen. I stepped forward, trying to break the awkward silence. "Emma, this is Margaret," I said, trying to sound casual. "She works at the bank, and I thought it'd be nice to invite her." Emma finally snapped out of it and forced a smile, but it was clear she was struggling to keep it together. "Nice to meet you," she said, but her voice was shaky. She turned to me, her eyes wide with something between panic and confusion. I was about to ask her what was wrong when Margaret spoke up. "Emma," she said, her voice soft but with an edge that made everyone listen, "it's been a long time, hasn't it?" Now, I was completely lost. How did they know each other? Before I could ask, Emma took a deep breath and pulled me aside. "Jack," she whispered urgently, "we need to talk. Now." We excused ourselves and went out to the terrace. I could tell she was on the verge of tears. What's going on? I asked, my mind racing with possibilities. Did Margaret do something to her? Was there some kind of history I didn't know about? Emma looked at me, her eyes filled with dread. Jack, I don't know how to say this, but Margaret isn't who you think she is. What do you mean? I asked, feeling a knot tighten in my stomach. She hesitated for a moment, then finally said, Margaret is my mother. My head was spinning. Your mother? Emma, that doesn't make any sense. You told me your mother passed away years ago. I thought she did. Emma's voice cracked as she spoke. That's what I was told, but clearly that was a lie. Jack, you have to believe me, I had no idea she was alive, let alone that she was working at your bank. I didn't know what to say. How could this be real? Margaret, our cleaning lady, was Emma's mother, and if that was true, why had she been pretending to be someone else? And for how long? Emma was trembling now, and I could see the turmoil in her eyes. What are we going to do, Jack? She asked, almost pleading. I took a deep breath, trying to process everything. We need to talk to her, I said finally. We need answers. We walked back into the party, and it felt like every eye in the room was on us. I could see Margaret watching us from across the room, that same knowing smile on her face. We approached her, and I felt like I was walking into a storm, not knowing what was waiting for us on the other side. Margaret, I said, trying to keep my voice steady, we need to talk. She nodded, like she'd been expecting this. I think it's time I told you both the truth, she said calmly. Let's go somewhere private. We found a quiet corner of the restaurant, and once we were seated, Margaret began to speak. Emma, there's so much you don't know, she started, her voice tinged with regret. But everything I did to protect you. And that's where things really started to unravel. So there we were, sitting in a quiet corner of the restaurant with Margaret, who, according to Emma, was her long-lost mother. My mind was racing, trying to connect the dots, but nothing made sense. How could the woman who'd been quietly cleaning my office for years be the mother Emma thought was dead? Margaret took a deep breath and began her story, her eyes flickering with memories long buried. Emma, she said softly, there's a lot you don't know about our family. Your father and I. Well, let's just say things weren't what they seemed. Emma looked at her, confusion mixed with hurt. What do you mean? Dad always told me you died when I was a baby. He said you were in a car accident. Margaret shook her head, tears welling up in her eyes. That was a lie. Your father. He wasn't the man you thought he was. We had to leave, Emma. I had to leave. Emma's face went pale again. Leave. Why? What are you talking about? Margaret glanced at me before turning back to Emma. Your father was involved in some very dangerous things. I can't go into all the details, but it wasn't safe for us to stay together. He made me leave, made me disappear so that you would be safe. I had to go along with it, even though it broke my heart. I couldn't take you with me, or they would have found us both. It was the hardest thing I've ever done. Emma looked like she'd been hit by a truck. So you just left and let me think you were dead. Why didn't you come back? Why didn't you tell me? Margaret wiped away a tear. I wanted to, Emma, more than anything. But it wasn't safe. Even after your father passed, the people he was involved with were still out there. I've been watching over you from a distance all these years, making sure you were okay. When I found out you were marrying Jack, I made sure to get a job at his bank, just to be closer to you, even if you didn't know who I was. I was stunned. All this time, Margaret had been working under my nose, and I had no idea she was connected to Emma. It was like something out of a thriller movie, but something still didn't add up. Margaret, I said, trying to keep my voice steady, if you were trying to protect Emma, why reveal yourself now? Why come to the party? She sighed, looking down at her hands. Because, Jack, things have changed. The people who were after us, they're gone now. I found out a few months ago, but I also realized that I couldn't keep living in the shadows. Emma deserved to know the truth, and I couldn't let you two start this new chapter of your lives without coming clean." Emma was shaking her head, still trying to process everything. "But why didn't you tell me sooner? Why wait until now?" Margaret looked at her with such sorrow in her eyes. "I was afraid, Emma. Afraid of what you'd think of me. Afraid you wouldn't forgive me. But seeing you here tonight, surrounded by all these people who love you, I knew I had to do the right thing." The weight of her words hung heavy in the air. Emma was silent, her eyes welling with tears. I reached out and took her hand, trying to offer some comfort, but I could tell she was torn between anger, sadness, and relief. Finally, she spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know how to feel. I'm glad you're alive, but how do I move past all the lies?" Margaret nodded, as if she'd been expecting this. "I don't expect you to forgive me right away. But I'm here now, and I want to be a part of your life, if you'll let me." We sat there in silence for a few moments, the reality of everything sinking in. Margaret's revelation had turned our world upside down, and I knew that nothing would ever be the same. But just when I thought things couldn't get any more complicated, Margaret dropped another bombshell. "There's one more thing you need to know," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "Your father. He didn't die of natural causes. He was murdered." And with that, the entire situation took a dark and unexpected turn. So there we were, sitting in that dimly lit corner of the restaurant, trying to wrap our heads around everything Margaret had just revealed. Emma's mother, whom she thought had died when she was a child, had been alive this whole time, working right under my nose. And now, Margaret had just dropped another bombshell: Emma's father was murdered. The words hung in the air like a dark cloud. I could see the shock and fear in Emma's eyes, and honestly, I was feeling the same way. This whole situation had gone from surprising to downright terrifying. Murdered. Emma's voice was shaky as she repeated the word. How? Who would do that? And why? Margaret took a deep breath, clearly dreading what she was about to say next. "It was the people your father was involved with, the ones who forced me to leave. They didn't like the fact that he wanted out. He wanted to protect you, Emma, and he was trying to cut ties with them. But they saw it as a betrayal, and they made sure he paid the price." Emma's face went pale again, and I could see the pain and confusion in her eyes. Why didn't anyone tell me? Why did I think it was just a heart attack? "Because they made it look that way," Margaret explained. "They wanted it to seem like natural causes so that no one would investigate. They were powerful, connected, dangerous. I knew that if I tried to come back into your life, they might come after you too. I couldn't risk it. I felt like I was in a nightmare. This was the kind of thing you read about in crime novels, not something that actually happens to people you know. But as much as I wanted to believe this was all just a horrible mistake, the look in Margaret's eyes told me it was all too real." Emma was struggling to hold back tears now. "All this time I thought he just died. And you knew the truth. Why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you warn me?" Margaret reached out to take Emma's hand, but Emma pulled away, still reeling from the shock. "I wanted to, Emma, but I was so scared. Scared that if I came forward, they'd finish what they started. But now that they're gone, I couldn't keep this from you any longer. You deserve to know the truth." I could see the turmoil in Emma's eyes as she tried to process everything. Her entire world had just been turned upside down, and I knew this wasn't something that would be easy to forgive. But at the same time, I could see that part of her wanted to believe Margaret, wanted to reconnect with the mother she'd thought she lost so long ago. And then, just as I thought the night couldn't get any more intense, my phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out, thinking it was just another well-wisher texting about the party, but what I saw made my blood run cold. It was a text message from an unknown number, and it simply read, "You're digging too deep, Jack. Back off before it's too late." I showed the message to Emma and Margaret, and the color drained from Margaret's face. "They're still watching," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Oh God, I thought it was over." Panic surged through me as I realized that whatever we'd stumbled into, it was far from over. Someone out there knew what we were uncovering, and they didn't want us getting any closer to the truth. My first instinct was to grab Emma and get the hell out of there, but I knew we needed answers now more than ever. "Margaret," I said, trying to keep my voice steady despite the rising fear, "what else are you not telling us? Who are these people, and what do they want?" Margaret looked at me, her eyes filled with a mix of fear and resignation. "They're part of something bigger, something I couldn't even begin to explain in one conversation. But they're dangerous, Jack, and if they think you're getting too close to the truth, they won't hesitate to come after you. After all of us." Emma was trembling beside me, and I could feel the weight of everything pressing down on us. We were in way over our heads, and I had no idea how to get us out of this mess. But I knew one thing for sure: we couldn't just sit back and let these people control our lives any longer. Whatever it took, we had to uncover the truth and protect ourselves from whatever or whoever was out there. And with that, we decided to leave the party, but not before making sure no one was following us. We needed to get somewhere safe and figure out our next move. Little did we know, the real danger was just beginning. Here's the final part of this insane story. If you've stuck with me this far, I really appreciate it. Things got pretty dark, but I promise, this last part is where everything comes together, though not in the way I expected. After we left the party, Emma and I headed back to our apartment, with Margaret following close behind. We didn't say much during the drive. The tension was so thick you could cut it with a knife. My mind was spinning, trying to make sense of everything Margaret had told us, and that chilling text message was still flashing in my mind. When we finally got home, we sat down in the living room, the weight of the night pressing down on us. Emma looked exhausted, emotionally drained in a way I'd never seen before. Margaret was quiet too, but there was a determination in her eyes now. It was like she knew this was the moment everything had been leading up to. "Margaret," I began, breaking the silence, "we need to know everything. Who are these people? Why did they kill Emma's father? And what do they want with us?" Margaret took a deep breath and nodded. "I suppose there's no turning back now," she said, her voice steady. "The people we're dealing with are part of a powerful syndicate. They operate in the shadows, controlling everything from illegal financial operations to political influence. Your father, Emma, was caught up in their web, and when he tried to leave, they made sure he couldn't." Emma was shaking her head, still struggling to grasp the enormity of it all. "But why did you have to disappear? Why didn't you take me with you?" Margaret's eyes filled with sorrow. "Because they would have come after you too, Emma. They made it clear that if I didn't leave, they would hurt you. I couldn't let that happen. I had to vanish so they would lose interest in our family." I felt a chill run down my spine. "And you think they're still watching us? After all these years?" Margaret nodded. "I thought it was over. But that message you received, Jack, it means they're still out there, still keeping tabs on us. They must have noticed me getting closer to you, and now they're warning us to stop digging." "But we can't just ignore this," I said, my voice rising in frustration. "They've controlled our lives long enough. We need to fight back." Margaret looked at me with a mixture of fear and respect. "You're right, Jack, but we have to be smart about this. These people, they don't play by the rules. They're ruthless, and if we make a wrong move, they'll come after us with everything they've got." Just then, Emma's phone buzzed. She glanced at it and her face went pale again. She handed it to me, and my heart dropped when I saw the message: "Last warning. Drop it, or we'll make sure you regret it." I felt a surge of anger. They're trying to scare us. We can't let them win. Emma was trembling beside me, but she took my hand and squeezed it. "Jack, I'm scared, but I don't want to live in fear anymore. We need to end this." Margaret nodded, her expression resolute. "I've been running for too long. It's time to face them." That night, we decided to confront the syndicate head-on. Margaret revealed that she still had contacts from her past life, people who could help us gather evidence and expose the syndicate's operations. It wasn't going to be easy, and it wasn't going to be safe, but we knew we had no other choice. We spent the next few days gathering everything we could: documents, records, anything that could prove the syndicate's existence and their crimes. Margaret was like a woman possessed, her fear replaced by a fierce determination to finally bring these people down. Finally, with enough evidence in hand, we went to the authorities. We were met with skepticism at first, but when we showed them what we had, they couldn't ignore it. They launched an investigation, and within weeks, key members of the syndicate were arrested. It wasn't without risk. There were threats, close calls, but in the end, the truth came out. The whole ordeal was terrifying, but it brought Emma and me closer together. As for Margaret, she and Emma began rebuilding their relationship, slowly but surely. It's not easy, and there's a lot of pain to work through, but they're both committed to moving forward. And as for me, I'm just grateful that we made it through. This experience taught me that you never really know the people around you, and that sometimes the truth is stranger and more dangerous than fiction. Life's finally starting to return to normal, though I don't think any of us will ever be the same. But at least we're free now. Free from the shadows, free from the lies, and free to start over. Thanks for sticking with me, Reddit. It's been a hell of a ride.